at ET Infra, we will be in a conversation with Jaya Varma Sinha, who very recently served as the CEO and chairman of the Railway Board, the apex decision-making body at Indian Railways. She has several decades of illustrious experience at Indian Railways. With her, we will discuss about various aspects of Indian Railways, such as its evolution since independence, capacity enhancement, as well as incorporation of models such as the PPP model and how it has augured well for the railways, and also adopting new technologies such as the Hyperloop, which are on the horizon. So, ma'am, really appreciate joining us out here at ET Infra. So really, lovely to have you, in today's presence. You have had a formidable career, in the Indian Railways, going right up to the zenith. Would like to know from you. This would be my first question. You have seen the Indian railway sector evolve. If you could sort of give us a sort of a brief description, how far have we come, since we started? Ours is one of the extensive railways network in the world, and also hence very challenging and difficult to sort of maintain and operate. But we have come a long way. And how was your experience, all these decades in the Indian railways?
So, first of all, I think we should understand the history of the network that we inherited at the time of partition. And what actually happened that though there was an extensive railway network on the Indian subcontinent, because of the partition, certain strategic sectors got disconnected, especially the areas in the east towards the north frontier, and the connectivity towards the Assam and Guwahati sector got disrupted very severely. So the biggest challenge that the Indian Railways had was to ensure that we have seamless connectivity towards that area, and that region remains integrated with the railway network of the country. So I think an exemplary action in terms of augmenting the infrastructure and ensuring connectivity towards the Assam was done literally in a matter of a few years, and that kind of connectivity was ensured. However, since we had inherited a network which had varying gauges, most of it was broad gauge, but there was some meter gauge, there was some narrow gauge, and there were some independent railways which were really not connected to the railways. So then came the task of integrating the entire network into a cohesive whole, so that you have seamless movement across the country. So that is where most of the infrastructure work which was being done in the initial decades was focused. And around the 80s, it was ensured that 80s and 90s that we will have a uni-gauge policy over the railways. And we have a same network across the country so that you can literally travel from, say, north to the south and east to the west without having to change trains. So with that kind of a background, it was essentially a consolidation of the existing network and a few augmentation and few integration in the system so that it remains a cohesive whole. But in the past decade, if we look at the journey in the past decade, that is the time when a transformative aspect has come into the railway infrastructure development. And now the capacity augmentation and is going ahead in a huge way. So the network has doubled in terms of track kilometers. We have doubled. We are going to increase it further. Today, the Indian Railways is considered the third largest network in the world in terms of the quantum it is carrying, and in terms of passengers, it is probably the second. So it's a mammoth network that we have. And Indian Railways is really working hard to ensure that the capacity that is required to answer the country's requirements are there in place.
Right. Ma'am, I understand that you were also, involved with operations and business development. Now, railways is a public service, right? Definitely the government does not necessarily expect any huge returns from it because it's a public service. But I would like to really, get a sort of an inside view from it. I'm quite sure, people within the railways or within the railway board do contemplate with a lot of other aspects of, business avenues or business development. We did, try out with the private operation of passenger trains. I would like to, hope that that is in abeyance, but maybe taken up, soon. But if you could highlight the regular services that we provide, whether it's the freight services or the passenger trains we run, and also the, operations at the stations. But what are the niche, business development plans that Railways has worked on during your tenure, and what are the potential of other ones in the coming future?
Yeah, if we talk of both the businesses separately, uh, if we talk of the freight separate from the passenger business. So starting with the passenger business, see, passenger can be divided into three kinds of segments. One is your regular segment of what we call the Aam Janta, where the requirement is to travel economically, efficiently across the vast expanse of the country. So that is the first and topmost priority. That is an affordable range of travel, but a comfortable and a safe mode of travel, which will remain timely across the entire country. So that is the prime focus of the infrastructure development also, both in terms of the rolling stock, that is the trains which are being added, and the tracks which are being added. So the entire network has been mapped into what is called the high density areas and the highly utilized areas. And they have been targeted for augmentation, multi-laning, multi-tracking, etc. And at the same time, the kind of trains that we have, the kind of uh, coaches that you see, they are being upgraded. So we have various segments, the newly commissioned Vande Bharats, of course, are there. The Vande Bharat chair car is already there. The Vande Bharat sleepers are coming. Then the Vande Bharat regional trains are there, and then we have the Amrit Bharat trains. The Amrit Bharat trains are completely non-AC mostly, but they are with world-class facilities, where a person at a very affordable rate can afford to travel for thousands of kilometers across the country network. So Amrit Bharat trains are again going to be a big USP for the Indian Railways, where the way our public moves across the network on Indian Railways becomes extremely comfortable and will remain economic. Then comes the short distance travel, where the commuter trains are there. So the newly launched Namo Bharat trains, which are there, a few of them are there already in service, and they will be increased further. This is again to ensure that the commuter journey, the unreserved segment for short distances, remains a very good and safe travel mode. So the passenger segment is going to grow in these ways. At the same time, the freight is not going to be neglected. So the additional capacity which is being built into the network is going to ensure that we are tomorrow able to run timetable freight trains. So that is going to be a game changer as far as the logistics sector is concerned. And it will bring down significantly the logistic costs on the network for the country as well. It will be a big boost to the economy. And at the same time, it will ensure that our export consignments meet their deadlines. So already that result is being seen with the dedicated trade corridors that have been commissioned, especially the Western sector, where the connectivity is to the Western ports. So the consignment, which was taking anything from 72 hours plus to reach the port from its loading point somewhere in the northern hinterland, is now reaching in 48 hours or even less, 36. Yes. 36 hours to 48 hours. So the time has reduced drastically already, whereas we only have two commissioned dedicated freight corridors. So with this kind of a development, the freight segment is also going to get a huge boost.
Right. Ma'am, since you really touched upon the freight segment, and that is for the railways, have been the revenue earner over many years and decades. With the coming up of DFCCIL, and I'm assuming that would be a separate entity, looking only after the logistics part of it. How then does it augur well for the main railways? Because the main railway still does sort of, run freight and logistics operation. So you have one entity which is solely focused on logistics and freight, but the railways itself do generate a lot of revenues from their own key main network on the freight operations. So if you could give us an outline how that will augur well when we already have a DFCCIL, how railways own separate freight network or operations will evolve.
We must understand that though the entity DFCCIL is separate, the network is the same. It is an integrated network. It isn't that the freight trains which are running on DFC are something else or they are out of the Indian Railway. It is the Indian Railways freight train which is running on the DFC network. So that is how the integrated network is going to work. The dedicated freight network can be understood as a part of the Indian Railways. However, these lines will be dedicated or carved for running freight trains and will release the capacity on the existing network for running passenger trains. So what will happen effectively is that the freight network we can afford to take out of cities. It can go outside cities. It can go through, 40, 50 kilometers outside the city where the built up area is not affected. And my existing network already goes through the city centers. And that is where my passengers would be happy to come and board a train. So this network, the existing Indian Railway networks, is going to be used primarily for passenger services, and the freight network and whatever augmentation of capacity which is going to come in and which will require the railway lines to go outside the city's built up area will be used for freight. So that will be a primary kind of differentiation in the network in terms of its movement pattern. But the flexibility will remain with the Indian Railways. The network will remain integrated so that flexibility is there for running trains as required and maximum utilization of capacity is done.
Right. Ma'am, I would also like to come this part, and this is sort of, debated within the infrastructure overall, and that the utility or the benefits of the PPP model. There's a lot of debate in some sectors, let's say the airports. The PPP has worked in some, let's say, like the metro system, especially the Hyderabad Metro. L&T is currently operator, but it has not really worked very well. And your views of PPP in the railway sector. There have been attempts made in terms of the railway station development, bringing in the private sector participant. But PPP in the railways, do they really work, or if they don't work, if there are avenues to improve that whole, space?
See, the experiments with PPP so far on Indian Railways have not really worked very well. And therefore, the PPP model itself is being modified. And so that you allow, I'm talking especially in context of station redevelopment. So the station redevelopment model has been a kind of, there is a little bit of tweaking being done so that the private participants, their risk is mitigated to some extent. See, we are in a domain where passenger services cannot be taxed excessively. This is an area where the government is absolutely clear that no kind of additional burden of any kind of redevelopment or modernization of the network is going to be borne by the armed passenger. So therefore, the business model doesn't work on generating revenue, additional revenue from the footfall that is happening at the stations. So the additional revenue model will have to be different. It will have to be innovative and to be thought about in terms of how they can use that commercial space better. The burden cannot come on the traveling public.
Right.
So that is why the PPP model has been tweaked. It cannot be a simple, airport kind of a model where you are taxing the passengers very heavily. And probably those passengers can afford that kind of payment for the services which are being offered at these airports. That is not the idea with the redevelopment of the railway stations. Here, the passenger, the traveling public is not expected to and will not be bearing any additional burden on them. So the revenue from these redevelopment of stations has to be in an innovative way that without impinging the armed passenger. So the policy has been changed a little, and there are few 10, I think, stations which have been identified for a pilot to see whether that works, or in case there is some further tweaking required, it will be done. But PPP has to be encouraged. We require public participation in redevelopment of various infrastructure projects on the country. And station seems to be one of those areas where a public participation, a private participation along with the public is feasible. So it's only landing at the correct, model which works on the Indian Railways.
Right. So, ma'am, then I would like to extend this to the passenger train services also. We did, initiate a little bit of effort in terms of, passenger trains privately operated by, players coming in. That did not particular tender or that, project did not work out. Your views, if at all, we need to again sort of, tinker around with it in the coming months or years, and how do we go about it?
I see it coming in the coming years. You see, once we have spare capacity, right now, the network is extremely utilized, highly utilized. 60% of our network has more than 100% capacity utilization. And that is where all the traffic is, that is where all the demand is, and that is where all the business is. So in case a private participant comes in, they would like to deploy trains on this network only so that they may earn some revenue, they get some traffic, and there is a demand. We cannot give them some, idle network where nobody is traveling. It will not work as a business model. So it is this congested sector which requires an experiment with a private train. So that can be given only when we have surplus capacity. So that is where we are working towards. The plan for infrastructure augmentation of the entire Indian Railways has been mapped out. And the bottom line is building capacity ahead of demand. And ahead of demand, that to the peak demand. So the bottom line is 20% plus the peak demand. So that is the kind of capacity we are building. But of course, this is going to take time and it is going to take resources, which we are thankful that we are getting the government support for as far as CapEx is concerned. And this capacity will come in. But it will take a couple of years at least, or even more, so that we at least the normal demand remains fulfilled and the saturation is not there, and we have capacity to offer to a private train operator to experiment on a popular segment, on a popular OD. So we see it happening, but probably the experiment was premature given the saturation on the network. So once we have the capacity in place, then again we can experiment with some more private trains.
Right. Ma'am, I would like to, ask you about in terms of the innovation. On the security side, on safety side, we have, experimented something with like Kavach being rolled out. The European system is still there, but hence we have still decided to go with our own because we will need it for our requirement in the future. Apart from Kavach, and then we have experimented with Vande Bharat, the new types of coaches. Where is the space of more innovation in the railway sector? Because in many other sectors, innovation has been led up by a lot of the startups. In aerospace, startups are very active in other areas. In railways, where do you see the scope of more innovation? And do those, really those startups from IITs and the private sector, are they being plugged in and new, let's say, products being developed?
Yes. Maybe it is not talked about too much, but there are a lot of collaborations with all the IITs and various other technical institutes where a lot of work is being done. I would like to name IISc Bangalore.
Yes.
They are doing a lot of work, and their startup is doing a lot of work in having systems which read the status of a wagon or a coach while it's moving. So you just put cameras which detect the entire undercarriage and the body of the coach which is passing across it, and you monitor its health. So this experiment is already in place, and what we call hot box detectors. We have various other wagon readers. So all these are coming from startups, and they are being deployed all across the network. See, railway is a system which is very complex, and probably people don't hear about these stories. But it's a huge collaboration of the entire technical know-how that we have in the country, and we are very proud of the kind of know-how we have in the country. So I just gave you one small example of how IISc Bangalore is doing a lot of work in this field. If you look at the kind of designs which are coming into the bridges and the structures that we are manufacturing, constructing, you see Chenab, and if you see Pamban Bridge, and if you see the Anji Bridge, a lot of technical input has been taken from the IITs, where the design has been ratified, the modeling has been done through them. So all the many of the IITs associating, especially the ones which specialize in structural engineering, are associating in all difficult designs and all these kind of areas where construction itself is a challenge. For example, the Pamban Bridge is a huge challenge. But I think Madras IIT and Bombay IIT was roped in for a lot of technical input from them. And technical audit was also conducted by them. And why we are talking of this general kind of innovation and give and take between the IITs and the Indian Railways. If we talk of out of the box kind of startups, then we should talk about the Hyperloop. The
Yes.
Hyperloop technology is very exciting, and IIT Madras has a startup which is developing this Hyperloop, which is there. And we are really proud of the way they are going forward. And they have already an experimental 400 plus meter long tube in place. And they are experimenting with the high speed pods, which will run on it. So it's from the entire spectrum of technology where all the inputs are coming in from the specialists we have in the country, outside India.
So, ma'am, you touched upon the Hyperloop, and that's a really fascinating technology and sort of an infrastructure model that's coming up. I wanted to know, you have been at the helm. What is the Indian Railways thought process with regard to Hyperloop? Because this is something we're developing on our own. A lot of standards related to, the quality, the products, the network itself. Those standards have to be sort of, streamlined and sort of officially declared or mandated. Where do you see how much the railways have made a progress? I understand the IIT Madras is working, at their end and developing this technology. But obviously, with regard to the regulation, the standards, that is where probably the railways will have to come in. When do you see those things happening?
Of course, the incubation fund has been given by the railways. So it's not IIT Madras only independently who's doing it. Railways supporting it wholeheartedly. And we are very much a part of this whole development. And our RDSO organization is also associating with them. So the standards will be fixed by the Indian
Right. Ma'am, last question. Has been at the helm of, the railway board. So I just wanted to know what was the experience. It has been, many years and decades of experience, and finally being at the, at the top of the, decision-making process. So how, does it feel? I'm quite sure that would be challenging and a lot of pressure also. But how was your tenure, as a head of the railway board?
It is of course challenging because it is a very, very challenging job. Being on the Indian Railways and then being at the helm, the entire responsibility is on your shoulders. So it is a very tough and a challenging job. But I guess that is the fun of it. And that is what makes it probably the best job in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm really, really happy that I got the opportunity. And I'm really grateful and thankful.
Right. So I really appreciate you, ma'am, joining us out here in ET Infra, and it was lovely having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much.